Hi boys and girls, Mrs. Schaefer here. So as promised from yesterday, I said that I would be giving you a lesson to go through some guided notes for the coordinate plane. So at this point, you should have this purple paper in front of you that says at the top, Graphing on a Coordinate Plane Guided Notes. If you do not have a pencil out right now, you'll want to go ahead and pull one out because I would like for you to follow along with this video and take notes as I record them on here so that your paper ends up looking just like mine. That way you'll have all of the information that you need in order to be able to successfully graph points and label points on a coordinate plane. So the first thing that we're going to start off with is a few important vocabulary terms. So in this first blank, a coordinate plane is a two-dimensional system in which the coordinates of a point are its distances from two intersecting straight lines called axes. So on here, we are going to fill in a coordinate plane. That is also sometimes called a coordinate grid. You'll hear me refer to them using both terms. They're used interchangeably. Next, we have an ordered pair. So an ordered pair is a pair of numbers that gives the coordinates of a point on the grid in this order. We always talk about the horizontal coordinate first and then the vertical coordinate, or we always call them the X and Y coordinate, and you'll always see them written as parentheses X, comma, Y. So you can add that to your notes and then we'll label that ordered pair. Finally, we talked about this word yesterday during our activity in the hallway. The point where the X and Y axes intersect, that would be the origin. So the origin is the beginning. That's where we always start when we're labeling points. We even said that if we think that we know where the point is, we still want to go back to the origin no matter what. Next, we will go ahead down and do some practice and labeling on a coordinate grid. So you'll see that we have some directions here on our paper and we have a completed coordinate grid. And we're just going to take these one step at a time. So to help us stay organized, I'm going to cover up most of our other directions. So the first thing that we're going to do is we are going to draw a point at the origin. It then says to label it 0, 0. So I'm going to come over here on my graph and right here at the origin where the X and Y axes intersect, I'm going to draw a point, and I'm drawing it large enough so that I can see the point. If I were to just do a tiny little dot in the middle, it would be difficult to see. So I have my point and I need to label it 0, 0. Yesterday, we talked about how you always label your points on a coordinate grid. And you can label them one of two ways. You can either label them with the ordered pair, or as you'll see with some of the samples below, we can label them with a letter. So moving on to number 2. It says label the end of the x-axis with an X. So that's going to go to the right-hand side of my arrow. So I'm going to come down to the bottom axis and I'm labeling it with an X. I'm not doing it over top of the arrow here, not above, not below, but right here on the right-hand side. So we have our origin, we have our x-axis. Next comes our y-axis. So next we are going to label the end of the y-axis with a Y. So again, just like yesterday, that one goes above the arrow, not directly on top of it, not to the left, not to the right, but directly above. So at this point, we have our origin, our x-axis, and our y-axis. And typically, labeling the x and y axis is something that I like to do first before I plot any points on the coordinate plane. Now we're going to practice labeling points, or we call it plotting points. Plot is just another way of saying where is the point located. We're going to put a dot there. So we need to plot a point at 10, 0. So I know that my ordered pairs are always written with my x first, followed by my y. And sometimes it can be helpful for students who are graphing for the first time to put the x comma y over top to help them remember that this is how far over we go on the x-axis, and the second value is how far up we go on the y-axis. So even though I know where the number 10 is here, I need to start at the origin, and I'm going to count over 10. So just like we said yesterday, I'm not counting the spaces in between. I am counting the actual lines. Okay, so I start here at 0. Here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. And then I see it says to go up 0. That means I'm not going up at all, right? Because that line is 0. So I'm going to place a point there. The next thing it says is label it A. So like I just mentioned, we can label them either with an ordered pair or with a letter. In this case, it's directing us to label it with a letter, and it's capitalized. So if it's a capital letter, I need to make sure that I match with a capital letter over here. And when you're labeling points, you just want to kind of find a spot that's convenient to label it. Notice it's not over top of the point. I'm not going to do it over this arrow because it would be difficult to read. I'm not going to write over top of the 10 because that would be difficult to read. I could have labeled it here in this box or up here in this upper corner, but you'll notice it's close to the point. Okay, that's what's important here, is that I can read it and it is close to the point. Next, number 5, plot a point at 0, 7, label it B. So again, I'm going to go ahead and label X and Y. So I am going to go ahead and start here at my origin, and I see that it says to go over 0. So that means that I'm not straying from this line right here. And then my Y value is 7. That means that I need to count up 7. So again, I'm counting the lines, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And I'm going to go ahead and place a dot there. Okay. Again, notice it's large enough so that I can see it. And then I'm going to label that B. Okay, so I have it labeled with the letter. I have my point. Next, number 6, plot a point at 2, 6. Label it C. Back to the origin. I go over 2 and up 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And if I ever am not sure how far up I'm counting, I can always kind of follow that line over to see what the value is next to it. And in this case, I know that it's a 6, so I know that I counted up high enough. Right now, this is a smaller grid, so I might not have to worry about that quite as much. But if I have larger grids or lines that are much closer together, sometimes if I'm getting to have higher values, it can be kind of tricky to see if I'm at the right height if I end up all the way over here. So that's one trick to help you figure out if you're at the right height. Just follow that line all the way over to the value that is labeled on the y-axis and make sure that you're at the right spot. Now this one says label it C, so I'm going to go ahead and label that one C. I have a few more left to do. Number 7, plot a point at 6, 2. Well, this is interesting because I see that I have the same 2 numbers that I had last time. So I'm wondering if it's going to end up at the same spot. So I have my X and my Y. So I'm going to go over 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and up 2. Interesting. So I'm going to put my point there and label it D so I don't forget. Now I see here that between my 2, 6 and my 6, 2, even though I have the same 2 numbers, I have a 2 and a 6 in each one, they're at totally different spots. So here it does show that order really does matter when I'm plotting points on a coordinate grid. Okay, moving on. Next, number 8, plot a point at 5, 5. Label it E. So back to the origin, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then up 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Place a point right there where those 2 lines intersect and label it E. Okay. Oh, I forgot to label that my X, Y. Okay, I have 2 more left. Number 9, plot a point at 1, 9. So I'm going to come back to my origin, come over 1, and count up 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I'm labeling that F. And finally, number 10, plot a point at 9, 10, label it G. So I know that I'm going to go over 9 and up 10, starting at my origin. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Plot a point right there, label it G. Now you'll notice today in looking at these points, all of our points fall at an intersection of 2 lines. Okay, that might not always be the case. It could be possible that we could have a point that said go over 3.5 and up 2, in which case I would come over to 3, and I know that 3.5 is between 3 and 4 right here at the middle, and then I could go up 2, and then if I went up 2, I would have a point right here. So it might not always be on an intersection of 2 lines, or maybe it could be in the middle of the box. Maybe I have a point like 2.5, 2.5, in which case I would start at the origin, come over 2, move over a half, go up 2 and a half. So here my point would be right here in the center of the box. So just know that it could happen where your points might not always fall directly on a line, but that typically would only happen if we were graphing points that include fractions or decimals, which isn't something that we spend a lot of time doing, but it is important that you know that it could be an option. So we've filled out the front part of our page. We have a few things that we are going to fill in on the back. So go ahead and take your paper and flip it over to the back side. And we have a few different sentences that we are going to fill in. These are just important notes that you want to remember. So this is something that you'll definitely want to reference when you take your graphing on the coordinate plane skill practice. So super important that we make sure that we go through and fill this out. So for the first one, when plotting points, start at the origin, move to the right on the x coordinate, then move up to the y coordinate value. So when plotting or graphing is another way that you might hear that. When plotting points, start at the origin. We always start at the origin. That's our beginning. Move to the right to the x coordinate. Then move up to the y coordinate. We call them coordinates, meaning the location of things. Okay, next. This is important. The origin is always labeled with a 0. And again, we talked about it on the other side of the paper, just to show you again very quickly. We don't use 2 zeros to label the origin right here. I don't have a 0 here and 1 over here. I just have 1 0. It is noted in the mathematical community that that 1 0 does indicate both the x and y values of 0. Next, arrows are always placed at the end of the x and y axes. That is to show, again, that those lines go on forever and ever and always. We are just limited by the size of our paper. Okay, next, points are always labeled with an ordered pair. So this would be a point that you graphed on the coordinate grid. They're always labeled with an ordered pair, a name or a letter. So if I'm saying a name, if it was some kind of mathematical scenario that we were working with, we might be labeling like the location of something. So maybe I would say library or bank or house, school. So as long as you have it labeled, but you must have it labeled with something. You can never just have plain old points on a coordinate grid without a label. Next, the scale on the x and y axes does not need to match, but must remain consistent on each axis. And what this means when I'm talking about scale, that means how I'm counting what I'm labeling. So here on the front, we counted by 1s, but it could be possible that we could count by 2s. I could have said 0, 2, 4, 6, 8. So that would be my scale. So it's the number that I'm skip counting by. What's important here is not that it matches here, because I could count by 2s on the x and by 1s on the y, and that would be perfectly acceptable. However, I have to stick with the same value. I can't count 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, because I'm changing my scale. So whatever I pick for the x, I need to be consistent with, and whatever I pick for the y, I need to be consistent with. They don't have to match, but it does need to be consistent. Next, when numbering or labeling the axes, I'm going to put numbering, but know that labeling is the same thing. When numbering the axes, the numbers fall directly below the vertical lines, not underneath the boxes, right? It's not in between the lines. It has to be below the lines and beside the horizontal line. So you'll notice here again on this side, the 7 is right here next to this line, right? Here's my horizontal line. There's a 7 right next to it. Here's a horizontal line. There's a 6 right next to it. Not in between, directly beside the line. Okay, next, when representing a real life situation, and this is something that we maybe haven't done yet, but we will definitely spend time doing. When representing a real life situation or scenario, either one would be okay. You must always include a title and label the x and y axis for what they represent. So if I'm talking about earning money while mowing lawns, here, maybe the number of lawns that I would be down here, and I would put in number of lawns. Here would be money, right? And then I could come up with a creative title for it. But there would be a label. There would be a title, a label here on the side, and a label here. And I wouldn't do that instead of the numbers. I would still include all of these numbers here. I would just do it directly underneath here. And then I even like to turn my paper and do this one sideways, right? So if this is money earned, I would write it right here above those numbers when I had my paper turned sideways. So there you have it, folks. You have your graphing on a coordinate plane guided notes. You are totally finished with those for today. Next, you are going to be working on a zoo activity with your partner. So just so that you have an idea of what to expect for that, I'm going to show that to you really quickly. That purple paper can go in your super special secret safe spot or in the math samples and notes section of your binder. So here, I have the zoo. I have a graph, and I see that I have points. And this is what I meant earlier when I said that you had to have a name, an ordered pair, or a letter to label them. See, these are all labels because I have a map of a zoo. So this says, find the coordinate pair that names the location of each animal at the zoo. Lions. This means, how would you get to the lions if you're starting here? Like if the origin would be the entrance where you walk into the zoo, how would you walk to the lions? We don't walk diagonal, right? Because we don't know how to do that right now. Right now, what we know how to do is follow the lines. We know how to go over and up, over and up, over and up. So to get to the lions, I would start at the origin. I would go over 1 and up 2. So my ordered pair for lions would be parentheses, 1, 2, and parentheses. And you'll go through and do the rest of this with your partner. Now for number 2, it says if you can only walk along the lines, which would be the zoo paths, that's where you would be able to walk, how many units would you need to walk to get from the lions to the seals? Well, if I wanted to know how many units I would walk to get to the lions from the beginning, so this is not this one, but just in general, I would start here. If I went from 0 to 1, that would be 1 unit. And then I would go up 2, 3. So that would be 3 total units. So you're going to do a similar thing to get from the lions to the seals. So you're going to start at the lions and count over, right, to get there. So I like to do these little like swoopy lines to show from one to the other. So that would be 1, 2, 3 to show that I have 3 units, just because it helps me count, but you can do it however you like. Here, if you were at the birds, would it be easier to see the apes or elephants, and why? So I'm looking for an explanation here. This one is telling me to plot it on my map and label it. So I'm including a new zoo attraction on my map. And then next is the reptile house closer to the elephants or the seals. How do you know? So for both of these, you would have to look and compare the distance from where you're starting to where you're going to see which one is closer. And again, here, how do you know? So it's not just which one it's closer to. There should be a how do you know, like a sentence explanation for that one. So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. You will go ahead now and get started on the zoo worksheet with your partner. You'll complete that, review it as a whole group before moving on to your independent practice. And I look forward to seeing how you did today. If you have any questions or anything for me, you can go ahead and jot them down on the side of your paper, and then I'll be happy to address them during math class tomorrow. Have a lovely day, and I will see you all tomorrow. Bye, guys.